Hello, it's nice to be with you here at Comic-Con at home, even if we can't quite be together just yet. I'm Anthony Breznican, an entertainment writer at Vanity Fair, and welcome to our panel on Chapelwaite, the upcoming EPIX series adapted from Stephen King's short story, Jerusalem's Lot. It starts August 22nd at 10 p.m. And I'm joined today by showrunners Peter and Jason Filardi and stars Adrien Brody and Emily Hampshire. Hey guys, how are you?
Great, Anthony.
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. I've loved Stephen King since I was a kid, and I still have my Night Shift paperback. Way back. The first story is Jerusalem's Lot, and it's kind of an odd one among his collection of stories. He's written a lot of books and a lot of short stories, but he hasn't typically written period pieces. So much of his work is set, in contemporary times. I wondered, Peter and Jason, if you can bring everybody up to speed who may not be familiar with the short story Jerusalem's Lot, and in particular, what's different about it from the novel Salems Lot.
Yeah, well, like you said, Jerusalem's Lot is, a lot of people often mistake Jerusalem's Lot for perhaps the cousin or the brother of Salem's Lot, but they're actually vastly different. As you pointed out, Jerusalem's Lot takes place in 1850 Maine, and it's really just a series of mostly it's just a series of letters between Charles Boone and his friend Boones, chronicling Charles Boone's coming to Maine and taking over this ancestral home that has inherited from his cousin Stephen, so they're very different. There's really no similarities between Jerusalem's Lot and Salem's Lot, except they take place in Maine.
They both have a lot at the end.
They do have a lot.
Well, there is a reference. There's a throwback to it, Jason. When in Salem's Lot, he's going back to Jerusalem's Lot to visit an old home, but as a writer, but it's a completely different theme or anything, and doesn't really delve into this world at all. You're right.
Well, they're connected in terms of real estate, like it's the same location.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and in Salem's Lot, the novel, it's like they're trying to figure out why this is an attraction for evil things, and I think we kind of get a hint of that in this short story set in 1850. That there's going back to colonial America, this place has been a little bit cursed or marked by bad behavior and the occult. Peter, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, out west, the Mount Shasta, is famous for spiritualism and attracting all this strange stuff. And I know in Salem's Lot, Stephen King talks about the house as sort of almost like a battery that collects evil energy, or an area that collects and stores evil energy. And so that's exactly what happens in that part of Maine.
Yeah, I think it's some areas they call it a vile vortex, and it's like you said, certain areas that just are evil in its own geography, and it attracts that energy.
You mentioned that it's a series of letters that are being written, and that style reminded me so much of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the fact that King is writing, about centuries past when he usually sets his work in contemporary America. It really does feel like he's going full Gothic with this, and I feel like that's something you captured really well with the show. Can you talk about what elements of the story he had that were evocative of that kind of classic, literary classic horror storytelling of
There's a formality in it too. I mean, obviously that is long gone in contemporary writing, and what's wonderful is to look back at the book, the story, after we'd shot this, because tonally there's so many things that I think Peter and Jason captured and managed to infuse all these other elements as well, but they really captured this tone, and the beauty of Stephen's writing is it's so cinematic and visual, and you really feel the tension and this foreboding sense. And, you know, if you imagine, I mean, what's beautiful, what's so attractive to me personally about Gothic horror is for someone in that time period to experience something unusual, whether it be you know, a vision of sorts or anything, and a diagnosis of that, or an assumption of that, and a belief in anything could be witchy. And women were burned at the stake, and people were, you know, they believed that, you know, people had powers, and it was another time. And so I feel like it is a horrific time for something to go wrong. And when things start to unravel for the characters, it just ratchets that up in a way that feels very truthful and inescapable. And I think that's really fun for the audience to jump into, you know, another time, and then to witness all these people that are really, you know, helpless. It seems like you know, an idyllic time in many ways, but you know, in a small town in Maine, but, you know, beneath the surface, there's all this danger lurking.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned the formality of the writing of the short story, the letters. And I feel like that really comes across in your performance as Captain Boone. It's very controlled and very restrained. And there's something in your voice that's almost soothing. You're very calm in the way your character addresses people who are even hostile to him, at least in the early episodes. I feel like, you know, that kind of belies
He tries.
about him. Yeah. But you know, there's that external control, but within, he's also very torn up and unstable inside, right? So he's very much like the town he has come to settle in. Is that about right?
Well, it stems from, I mean, for me, when I try to discover a character, you have to get to the root of the man that you're portraying. Mm-hmm. And Charles Boone, the man that I portray, has a very tragic family history, and his childhood was very traumatic, you know. And I don't believe I'm giving too much away, but, you know, his father essentially turned against him, and he had to basically grow up his own man without parents, essentially. And there's just coming to terms with that rejection, and then there's the need to be strong enough and face the world as an adult, as a child. And I think that shapes every decision thereafter and every interaction thereafter. And when we begin the story, you know, Charles is now a father of 3 young children who are wonderful, and his wife just passes away, and he's a ship captain on a whaler, and he's at sea. And that too, all of those are big factors in any individual's life that would shape their interaction and their freedom of expression, right? And I think all of the shell of what I'm trying to convey of the man is very ordered, full of ordered, and even being a sea captain, there's a lot of rules and preparedness that is necessary in order to face the elements and to face the unknown, and to be in charge of a crew of men who are of all walks of life and are you know, there for, you know, various reasons, but you know it's a rough environment. Mm-hmm. And I think he has to have a very measured tone approach to interacting, and what it really is shielding all the chaos that you mentioned, Anthony, which is tremendous inner turmoil, and a darkness that he is not fully cognizant of, and is trying to come to terms with, and trying to be a father and raise his children now without their mother, and fortunately he meets Rebecca, played by Emily, and she offers a much needed assistance by taking the job as a governess, and she helps him immensely.
Rebecca's a new character. She's not in the original short story. Emily, when I talked to Jason and Peter, they described her as a modern woman in this long ago time. And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you say you kind of modeled her on Mary Shelley a little, which kind of goes back to the classic Gothic horror storytelling? Tell me how she fits in, and also how she doesn't fit into this time.
Me or well, I always kind of saw her like Stephen King, because she's not in the story, and she is writing this Gothic novel, and I just always thought of her like if Stephen King was a woman in the 1850s, he would be Rebecca Morgan. So that sorry,
I like that.
And I think what's interesting is to hear Adrien talk about how ordered Charles is, and hearing that, it reminds me that Rebecca, like, she went to Mount Holyoke. She is a modern woman. She grew up essentially without a father for most of her life, and I think, especially being educated at that time, I think she's the anti-order. She questions things. She comes in and shakes things up, I think. So that's how I saw her. Yeah.
Okay.
Jason and Peter, when we spoke for the first look on this series, you talked about how you wanted the threat to be a little bit of a mystery to people as they begin, the unfolding of the story, just as it is in the short stories. You don't really understand what's going on, except that Charles Boone is hearing scratching in the walls, and it's interesting, his mind is always reaching for the logical explanation. He's not an Agent Mulder kind of person where he wants to believe the most outlandish thing. He prefers to justify things with other explanations, more reasonable, tangible explanations. Can you talk to us about building that mystery and what directions it could take in the viewer's imagination as they're watching it? It could be a haunted house, could be madness in the mind of this fellow who's experienced a lot of tragedy. But tell me about creating that atmosphere where I'm not quite sure what is afoot here.
I think that, taking some elements again from the original short story, the horror or the antagonist is sort of an interpersonal horror or threat that evolves or devolves, as the case may be, into sort of a interpersonal horror or threat, and then goes even further and evolves into sort of a cosmic horror. Mm-hmm. So which is very Lovecraftian, obviously, and it's in the short story. So yeah, I think to keep it sort of interesting for 10 hours, it's fun to change the face of the antagonist.
Yeah, that was really important to us, I think, from the start, was to keep what's truly going on inside Chapelwaite a mystery, and have people guessing or going along with the ride. And we wanted nobody to be ahead of the game. In other words, as you're watching it, you're also watching Charles figure out what's going on, or try to figure out what's going on. So like you were saying, perhaps, you know, it feels like a haunted house movie, or perhaps it feels a little Shining-esque with Charles's inner dangerous turmoil coming about. What's real, what's not. We know he's suffering from, you know, some form of madness. But then, of course, and then there's the detective side of the story. Like I said, Charles is going about trying to figure out what is going on inside Chapelwaite, what's going on in this town.
That's very Edgar Allan Poe.
Why are people so hostile towards me and my family? I thought this was, you know, very different. I thought I was going to come here and we're a well-respected family, the Boones, and suddenly just the Boone name spreads fear. And so a bit of, like I said, a detective story. And then, of course, ultimately, he discovers something different. Takes us on a whole nother wild ride. So, yeah.
Talk to me about Chapelwaite itself, as the production design of the home, where you shot this. You know, that's the name of the estate that he's inherited. And, you know, it's part of a tradition of grand old spooky houses, but how did you want it to be different? How did you want it to be similar to the kind of expectation that we have of a place like this?
I thought we kind of wanted it to be similar to what you expect in a way. It is a Gothic horror trope. And it's fun to step into. It's just, I think what makes it fun is, you know, injecting a new cast of characters, coming at it from so many different angles, and, you know, a single dad trying to, who will do anything to keep his children safe, you know, and throwing him into one of these environments. And so, I mean, I thought we kind of wanted Chapelwaite as the grand decrepit manor to just kind of like in the short story, you know, to just stick to that.
Well, it's one element of it's one element of it's a main element of the concern, but aside from coming to terms with having inherited this spooky old house and reacclimating to this new place, the town is so inhospitable, mm-hmm. and in so many respects, and it's such an unexpected thing. So there's already this major shift going on for these characters, right? They've been living a life at sea. These children are, you know, have grown up out at sea, with brief reprieves on tropical islands in a very different atmosphere, without the formality and all that comes with, you know, coming to an eastern port town of the, you know, mid 1800s, and by Charles's wife was Polynesian, and so our children are mixed race. And as they come to this town, they are also mistreated and looked upon with a degree of suspicion just because they're different. And that is in addition to a resentment of whatever past wrongdoings my character's ancestors have done. And so there's this burden thrust upon this family. Not only have they lost these children have lost their mother, Charles has lost his wife. They are now moving into this giant old home, which they're not used to. And everything is unraveling around them. So it goes well beyond that. I think it's, you know, it's definitely, it's so frightening, but the horror is this whole world encroaching upon them.
Well, I think they all work together nicely too. Not to be too high-minded about it, but I feel like the monster of this story is history. There's the history of this house. There's the biological history that Boone is inheriting, you know, where he's worried that he will lose it the way his father lost it, the way his previous ancestors grappled with visions and terrifying images they saw. There's the history of the town that really rejects outsiders. As you said, you have this mixed race family coming to settle there, and they are not welcome, and explicitly so. They literally say in later episodes, like, we don't want people, who aren't white in our town. And I wondered, Jason and Peter, if you could talk about how these elements of history all sort of combine. I think it adds some nice depth, but also history is scary when you find out what happened in certain places, battlefields, old houses.
When you find out what happened in the house we actually shot in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Several people died in that house. Several people, like the mother, and then the kid died, and then there's a whole, they rent that place out as an Airbnb. And they have the history on the wall. Did you guys ever read that story of the house?
I did. It was horrible. Yeah,
horrible.
They lost like 7 children and moved.
Yeah. So it's like the house was typecast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think you that is fine. I think you were asking about, yeah.
Like, well, these characters are trying to escape that history. They're trying to change and say, actually, not everybody has to look the same in order to live together and be happy.
Well, if I may, I mean, I think, what Jason and Peter have done so well in this is they've infused which is a theme within the story, but history is a grim reminder of what is still wrong with the world, right?
Yeah.
And there's just there are forces that have not really changed enough through time, and again, as I mentioned, there's such a fear of foreigners or people who are different, and there's racism within this community as well, and I think, and I just think these guys did a wonderful job with referencing so much that is still so wrong within the context of this story.
Yeah. So Jason and Peter, can you talk about being haunted by our past, by our collective pasts, our history as a country or as a town, our history as a member of a family, and how we push back against that, or how we become consumed by it or destroyed by it?
Well, what we really liked about the character of Charles Boone, and it will speak to this somewhat, is that he is a guy who ran off at around 12 years old and wound up on a whaling ship. Mm-hmm. And he's grew up aboard ships like this, where, as Adrien said, the crews were full of everybody, every race, every religion. I mean, whaling was not a glamorous life, and it wasn't for the wealthy. It was thrown together a bunch of really scalawags from New England, and then island people, Indians, people from Africa. I mean, if you've read Moby Dick, you would see that, the cast is crazy, but that's really how it was. And what we loved about Charles Boone was that Charles is a guy who is different. So his childhood was different. He's landed on a boat that's different. He grew up on it. He doesn't see color. And that's what we loved about him, that Charles Boone, as a captain of a ship, sees a man for his worth, not his birth. Is this a guy a good worker? Can he help me kill whales and bring the oil back and sell it and make money? That's all that matters to a guy like that. And that we thought is a great character, right? He doesn't see that. So, and then he's different because he goes, and which wasn't uncommon, was they would stop in the islands and you would mingle with, local women, and you might fall in love with an island girl. And that's another thing that makes Charles different and colorblind. And we love that about him. And so when the kids come back, when he brings his biracial kids back and they face this scrutiny from the town and just awful behavior, it's very different to the kids because they grew up on a very diverse boat their whole life. And and we just although it's very relevant now, all going on, because history continues to repeat itself. We have a hard time learning, and we go back, and then we go forward, and we go back, and we go forward, it seems. To our story, it wasn't intended that way. It seemed very organic, really, to the character of Charles and to the storytelling that we were trying to tell. We loved that whaling history was all kind of built in for us. And so bringing it to small town Maine and small town New England with Charles and his children, it was just very organic to the storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us anything about the origins of this project? Like, how did you come to it? Was it your idea to turn the story into a series? Did you ever think of it as a movie?
Well, Stephen King had seen 17 again, and he was like, I need that guy. I need that guy.
Yeah.
How did it come about? Let's see. Well, you know what? Actually, my brother and I were originally pitching a different horror project to EPIX at the time, and as we were pitching that, or I believe it was on the ride home. We were driving home. We got a phone call from Michael Wright, who's the president of EPIX, and he said, "Hey, I just got a Stephen King short story just landed in my lap from producer Donald DeLine. Would you guys be interested in doing that?" And of course, we were like, "Yeah, absolutely!" Being huge King fans, and my brother's already done a few King projects already. So that's really how it came to us. And we jumped at it because, I said, big Stephen King fans. We'd pretty much adapt his grocery list if we were asked to, right? So
it's very scary.
Rotten eggs.
Adrien and Emily, can you tell me, is there any story behind your involvement and how you got into it, or what attracted you to the roles?
Well, I was hiking the Himalayan mountains in Nepal, and I got a call.
You must have great cell reception.
I didn't. Better than you'd think, but you'd have to do it only at certain at stops. I mean, we're at 8,000 feet, and I had to make a decision at 8,000 feet, which I'm glad I said yes. But it was a very exciting proposal coming from Michael Wright at EPIX and Donald DeLine, and I had been waiting for a role of this nature for a very long time, as Jason so eloquently put, it is a man who is very pure of heart and very complex and strong, and so strong in spite of all of the things that conspire against him, both internally and externally. He's a leader and a father, even though he's quite stern. He's really doing the best he can, and he's a very noble human being. And I was immediately attracted to it. I'm also a Stephen King fan and love all of these elements that are so difficult to not tell you because I'm not allowed to say anything. But it is so exciting. This show is so exciting and frightening, and I love to scare people, and I love to be scared. And it was such a thrill to have all of these elements come together. And they came together at a mountaintop in Nepal for me. And then I found myself coming back and getting to know these lovely people and collaborating with them in Halifax for a long time. And yeah.
it does have those elements that, you know, without getting specific, that are almost like campfire stories, or this thing happened near here, folk tales, and almost weird, like paganistic rituals or ancient religions, and all of that kind of combines to create a great spooky Halloween type atmosphere in a show like this. Emily, what can you tell us about why you joined the project? You're coming off of Schitt's Creek, and everybody knows you as Stevie at the
King now.
And now you're Stevie King, yeah. This is a change of pace for you.
Yeah, a great change of pace. I remember that I was not on a mountain. I was in LA, and I got this script, and first my agent, who has been my agent since I was 13. So there's a real relationship there in her saying, I want you to be in a corset. And she was really like, I'm sick of these plaids. I want you to be in a corset. And so that was part of it. But then when I read the script, that Rebecca was a writer, felt so kind of, this sounds dumb, but I do believe sometimes scripts come to you at certain times. And at that time, I had just started writing and getting a project of my own off the ground. And I was reading On Writing by Stephen King. I was like, and it felt very magic. And then I had a meeting with these guys and Donald DeLine. And after that meeting, having only read one script, because there's also a lot that happens in the show that we can't talk about, but also that I didn't know about. I didn't know that certain terrifying things happen in this. Only had read one script. But when I met with these guys, I don't listen for Filardi brothers. I just loved them, and I really wanted to work with them. And if you meet Donald DeLine, there's this energy from him that is just, it's rare to meet such a seemingly good producer, like a good guy and smart. And I wanted to work with these guys, and Adrien, of course. So yeah, it was a no-brainer. I also wasn't on a mountain, so.
So we're nearing the end of the conversation here, but I wanted to bring up one of the motifs, or I hesitate to call them monsters, but one of the creepy elements of Chapelwaite are worms. And worms appear, you know, sometimes they're not really there, sometimes they are really there. The idea of a worm as a kind of ancient, unknowable being below the earth, it comes up in the story. And Charles Boone has visions of worms. What was it like working with these unusual co-stars, and how often were they real, how often were they visual effects, and how often were they something you picked up from the bait and tackle store?
Well, I mean, yeah, Charles has an intimate relationship with these little guys, so much so that at one point, I mean, I guess I can discuss, you know, Charles finds a worm in his nostril. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we were shooting during, you know, a pretty difficult time during COVID, and we had a great amount of restrictions in place for us to be able to work. And I remember that we had, anyhow, long story short, there was the option of doing this with computer generated worms. And then I piped up and said, let's use a real one. And we had a worm wrangler. Our worm wrangler was handling these worms with her bare hands. And I was more concerned about the bare hands touching my worm than the worm which maybe I was trying to not focus on the worm that had to go into my nose. But I had offered up that the worm could go into my nose. And it did. And then there were several people wanted to put alcohol on the worm to clean the worm. I said, no, we're not doing that. No, there's no worms are getting harmed on my watch. And so I rinsed the worm and said a few prayers.
That worm had quite a day.
The worm had quite a day.
Quite a lot.
Yes.
But worms, you know, worms are good things. They're good for the garden. They make things grow, but there's also an aspect of decay there. What's the spookiness of worms, Jason and Peter?
I guess there's a few ways you could, you know, we all eventually become, isn't it wormwood or worm food? You know? I mean, it's all of our shared destiny. And but you know, the like in the short story and like in Lovecraft, there are these ideas of older gods before our God. The idea that, you know, before our God came around and said, "Let there be light," there was this primordial darkness, and in this original darkness lived a very old and comfortable God known as the worm, who, when ours came along, got cast into the shadows and is sort of lurking there and waiting for a chance to return. So on the grandest scale, the worm is, I don't know, a metaphor for old fears, original fears, you know.
And ending up in the ground.
Yeah, ending up in the grave, or coming back from the grave, whatever. Maybe.
I have to say, I just right before this saw the first episode, and it's amazing. You guys, you did such a great, and Adrien, I know it's weird to say on this, but like I just watched it, you're brilliant in it, and the kids are so great. But speaking of worms, seeing those worms, I fortunately didn't have to work with worms. Had I had to, I wouldn't be in this project. But the worms look good. The worms look good. The whole thing looks really great. But yeah.
Well, we were fortunate, man. We with Adrien, with Emily, and all our other cast kids. I mean, really, they really brought our scripts to life in a way that we were just so over the moon with. I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better cast. It's really yeah, it's humbling. It's humbling. You know, you write these things and it's on paper, and then you give it to real professionals. And I mean, like real professionals, like these guys before me. And they just take it to another place, and you just sit back in awe on set and you watch them do their business. And you're just so damn happy. You're just so, really, they were just awesome. They're just awesome. And I think the final product, is awesome.
We had a wonderful supporting cast as well. I mean, the all the other actors that came on play the townsfolk, and you know, they're wonderful. And really, it really has a vibe, and that's really thanks to, you know, the writing is wonderful as well. But you can't bring that to life unless you have all these people that are really devoted to that. And I think it was a very special experience. It was very challenging in many respects because of what my character was coping with. But everybody was such a pleasure. Really, it was such a pleasure to work with so many wonderful, talented people.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for being with us today. Peter, Jason, Adrien, Emily, good luck as the show rolls out. It starts on August 22nd, EPIX. Check it out then, Chapelwaite. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Anthony.
Very much. Thanks.